iOS 13 versus One UI. That video's coming up right now. Let's go. So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology, and welcome to iOS 13 versus One UI. The phone's on the table for this video. iPhone 10, S10e, doesn't really matter. We're showing off the software here. Now, this is not a video where I'm gonna go ahead and say that Apple is better than Samsung or Samsung is better than Apple. So if you were coming here to see how much better your Apple ecosystem is over, Samsung, or if you're a Samsung fan, you're like, how much better this system is over this, that's not gonna happen in this video. We're just gonna compare feature to feature set to see which one might be better for you. So let's quickly confirm the software before some hater gets in the comments. Bro, that is not iOS 13. I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm out of here. You can see right there, iOS 13, One UI 1.1, Android 9 Pie. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna talk about is the dark mode versus the night mode. Now, let me know what you like better the naming. Do you like the name dark mode or do you like the name night mode? Just a little bit curious about that. So in Apple, it's up here in the control center. It's also available in settings, same with Samsung, but over here you can see night mode is available. Now let's turn on night mode here. And let's go ahead and turn on dark mode. Now, one thing you notice right away is that the whole settings tray up here got dark. So Samsung nailed it there. Apple over here, it's still translucent. You can still see some color here. So this is just darker right from the start over on Samsung's platform. Now on Apple's platform, you see that the wallpaper also gets dark, whereas Samsung's doesn't. So in some areas, you're gonna find that the dark mode is darker in Apple. In some areas, it's darker in Samsung. So for example, in the calendar, Apple's calendar is actually fully black right there. So it's a really dark calendar, but in Samsung's, it's kind of a grayish color. Still very dark, but you can see that it's just a little bit lighter. Now, one thing I will say about these dark modes is that Apple's is a little bit more consistent because the whole system is Apple. What do I mean by that? So if you're browsing in the dark mode, it's nighttime, you're on your Samsung phone, you wanna go download an application. Well, all of a sudden you have to deal with this very bright Play Store because this is a Google app. Now over here on the Apple device, it's Apple's app, the App Store, so it's fully dark. So I think you get a little more consistency with the applications being dark on the Apple device, whereas with the Samsung device, you're gonna see a little bit more white apps because of the Google apps not all being dark. Now going into the News app, this is another application in dark mode where Apple really has a very dark application. Now over here, you can use Google News, another Google service. There's no Samsung News app like to compete with that right now. So if we click that, and you could put this in dark mode as well. Let's go to the technology headlines, and you could just see that basically they're both really dark. So you can get that going on. Now, where these both don't do that well is when you click an article, for example, on either, they get really bright again. So I would like to see both of these still get an update to make this a little bit, darker when you're actually reading that article. But you can see based on these examples I've been showing you right here that there's just a lot of dark apps on both of them, but the Apple applications are a little bit more consistent in their dark mode. But one area where I really like Samsung over Apple in this regard is in the Safari versus Samsung Internet application. Now in dark mode, you're gonna see Apple's Safari still has a white browser that's still gonna be pretty bright on your eyes, whereas Samsung's browser is fully dark, which you can change to a light mode if you so choose right here. And then you can also go ahead and put it in dark mode. So in certain areas, Samsung is better here in dark mode. In certain areas, Apple is better. You really just gotta pick and choose which you like better. For me, I kinda like the pitch black apps of Samsung, but I really like the more consistent dark mode going on with Apple. Now let's talk about gestures. Now it's different because on Apple device, you're gonna be forced to use these gestures. That's how you navigate the phone, but I think it's a little bit more intuitive on the iPhone to use those gestures. Whereas on the Samsung, they do have gestures, but you have to work a little bit more to learn it because over here, you could swipe up and it goes to the applications, but if you swipe up over here, it's the back button, so it really doesn't do anything. So you can see right there, you just have to get used to it, but once you do get used to it, it's no big deal. You swipe from the middle, it does go home. If we click here, this is the back button. From this side, you can see it went back and then home. So it's just a little bit choppier. I don't think it's quite as fluid as the iPhone, but what Samsung did was they still included the ability to have home button keys. So you have more ways to navigate the S10e than you do on the Apple iPhone. Now, when it comes to how you can actually see information on these devices, they're different in that Apple doesn't allow you to put widgets on the home screen still. You can only see them off to the left. Now, some people like that. Samsung also has this in the form of Bixby Home. You could just populate this with whatever you want, and boom, there you go. Now over here, you can also place widgets here on the home screen because this is an Android device after all. So definitely a lot more customization. Now I had some users complaining in my iOS 13 beta review that Apple still has not allowed you to put apps where you want on the screen, and you still cannot do this. If I want to place this weather here, it's going to fly right up into the grid as it's always done in prior iOS versions. So iOS 13 still does not allow you to place icons wherever you want on the screen. So for a more personal experience, One UI is still going to be a better pick than iOS 13. Now, one thing I really like about Samsung's UI versus, Apple's UI is that they actually changed the icon set on here. So everything started to look a little bit different, at least from the Samsung applications for One UI. Now, when Apple brought out iOS 13, I see the same icons once again. So it's that flat UI design that looks very similar, dating all the way back to iOS 7. So still, this is gonna feel very familiar, and still we don't have anything that looks completely redesigned. So in this regard, I do think Samsung is a little bit better. Now, both of these are 5.8-inch screens, and most phones are large enough where you might need one-hand ability sometimes. And you have reachability here for iOS 13, same as prior iOS versions, so nothing new in this feature. You still got to keep swiping every time you go into an app. You need to do something, it'll fly back up. Now, I do like reachability, it works very well, but I don't know, I might like this one-handed mode, dedicated one-handed mode on the Samsung One UI. So when you pull this over, you can get a bigger screen here depending on your hand size, and it's like a full-blown phone. It's like a little small phone in the corner, and it really does help with one-handed use. You can also move it side to side if you're a lefty or a righty, so you really just gotta choose which one you like better. Now this next one, I am just so disappointed in Apple, and it's like they don't even listen to their customers, and that is split screen. I think many users would love to have split screen on their iPhone. You've been able to do this on Android devices and Samsung devices for years, and you could still do it here. And Samsung even has an extra trick up its sleeve, which allows you to do pop view. You can go over here and make this app smaller here, move it around. And some people say, I'm not gonna do that stuff on a tiny little smartphone screen. Well, I have an argument for you. If you're on the go and you're doing some calculations, you need to hop back in your banking app, you need to check your finances and stuff. Do you really wanna go to your bank, then go back to the calculator, go back to your bank, keep checking it when you could just have this little nice, convenient pop view icon to do your calculations really quick? What if you're trying to do something in Google Maps? You can see the Google Maps pop view right here, bring it down a little bit, and then go ahead and do some quick browsing about your upcoming trip or something. Maybe all the information you don't want to see is in that application. Get right back to your maps and bring it out. So, I mean, this stuff is very practical and very useful. You can say all you want all day, well, I don't do multitasking on my phone. That doesn't mean it's not great to have it there for the people who do want to use that feature. So with the Apple device, you are kind of limited to just going through multitasking like so. And I mean, it works fine if you're just gonna be hopping in between one app at a time, but that's how you're gonna do it there. Now, one area where Apple totally just copied, Samsung Android phones in general is this quick path typing thing they have going on here. Like, it's identical basically to the Samsung device. I'm glad they brought it because they needed it. You could already do that on iPhone through Google Keyboard or a swipe keyboard, but I'm glad they finally officially brought it to iOS 13, and you can now swipe text on your keyboard. Now, where Apple is really just crushing Samsung, I believe, is when it comes to this Memoji versus Animoji things. Samsung actually came out with this after Apple, but you can see Memoji stickers right here in iOS 13. Now, if I go over to the camera, you can see I can hit this AR emoji guy, and I could create emoji in here, and then you got like some kids characters and some little, cartoony things, but it's just not as refined when creating this character on the AR emoji for Samsung. If you're into that stuff, I would pick the iOS 13 experience all day. Now, one thing I'm just like, why Apple did you give me an 8 plus, a 7 plus? Got me used to my landscape mode, and then you took it away in the XS Max, the iPhone 10, the XS, the XR. These phones are pretty big. They can definitely do landscape. Maybe it's limited by the Face ID technology being in the way or something, I don't know. But the Samsung device has a hole in the screen and can still do landscape mode here. And it does work well. You know, you're watching a video, you wanna go browsing, you're lying in bed, you got your phone propped up. It's nice to have landscape mode, regardless of the people gonna get in the comments and say, nobody uses landscape mode, everybody uses portrait. Well, maybe you do, but speak for yourself, because I use landscape mode daily. Now, talking about the camera experience between iOS 13 and Samsung's One UI, they're not that much different, besides that Apple doesn't give you any way to change your video recording settings right from the app itself. There's also no pro mode for photography, so you kind of just got to stick with the automatic modes in iOS 13. Now over here for Samsung, you can change pretty much everything right from the application itself. You hit the settings and you have everything right there. So that's a lot more convenient to use. And that leads me to think that the Samsung camera experience is just better. I mean, because you can change everything right there. You're really gonna tell me, like, what's the argument? Oh, it's better to go into settings and change my camera settings from the settings and then go back to my camera. No, nobody wants to do that. I think most iPhone users want that camera setting to be right in the camera, where you can just change your video stuff and everything right there. It's just common sense. Come on, Apple, let's get that one together. Okay, so when it comes to Bixby versus Siri, most modern Samsung phones have a Bixby key, which annoys a lot of users. And I don't think Bixby is necessary on an Android phone because you have Google Assistant, but Siri gets a more updated natural voice. What's the weather like today?
Here's the forecast for today.
So she has a nice voice here in iOS 13. Bixby, what's the weather like today? Little bit.
It is partly cloudy with a high of 80 degrees and a low of 56 degrees.
So you see, she sounds okay as well, but that was a little bit slow to respond. So overall, I think a lot of people do enjoy Bixby, as do people enjoy Siri. Siri is just a little bit more refined and a little bit quicker to respond. Now, Bixby learns as it goes, so it might be a little smarter in certain areas than Siri, but I just find it to be a little bit slower to respond, and it makes the phone stutter a little bit from the side menu once in a while. Now, Apple has another win under its belt, and that's the ability to kind of force press in these applications. They feel a little bit weird, like 3D Touch is gonna go away, like they don't respond as good as they did in 12, but you have a lot more applications that will give you functionality through just pressing down on it. So I think this is gonna come to the XR as well, the way it seems. And then over here, you can't really do that on all applications. Now you can do it on some Google apps like YouTube. You can see search, subscriptions, and trending, but there's just a little bit more of this going on for the Apple device. So I think that's a win to iOS 13 if you like shortcuts into certain features you're gonna use in your apps. I don't find most people using that stuff, but it's a little bit better on iOS 13 if you care. So when it comes to privacy differences, Apple really pushes it here, and I think they're doing a better job. They're really encrypted these phones, and also they have this new privacy feature where if you sign in, it's gonna let you do an Apple sign-in coming in future versions of iOS 13. It will be ready by official. Now, the Samsung phone relies on Samsung Knox, as well as, you know, Google's built-in security with their monthly Android updates. Seems like we get a security patch almost every month on these Samsung phones. And I just gotta say that overall, I don't really notice these things that much, and that's because they're going on in the background. So I do notice that the ad tracking is just spot on for Android, and it really is kind of creepy sometimes when you're, you know, browsing something, and next thing you know, you keep seeing that thing all over your phone. Every time you're browsing the web, you start seeing an ad over and over again, personalized ad tracking. So you notice that lack of privacy a little bit more on the Android side. Now, Apple has long been the king of, you know, transferring things between two devices, hardware, software integration, stuff like that. AirDrop being one of the biggest. Now, AirDrop has a competitor here now. If you're using all Samsung devices, you now have something called Wi-Fi Direct. Now, it's not quite as nice as AirDrop, and it seemingly only works very well between two Samsung Galaxy devices. But I find this to work pretty well, and you could transfer stuff really easily between a Samsung device and another Samsung device. And for a speed and performance test, that is to be continued. Now, what can I say overall? I can say that iOS 13 gets a lot closer to One UI when it comes to its dark mode and stuff like that. Really improves the Apple experience, overall polish. The services are gonna be a lot better, like Apple TV, Apple News, now with the dark mode and everything like that. Privacy gets better in this quite a bit. Maps gets quite a bit better here. Nice new wallpapers that change between light and dark modes here with iOS 13. If I cancel this one out, you can see you got a blue wallpaper Right here, you also have a darker pinkish color orange right there in this wallpaper. So I mean, there's a lot going on here for iOS 13, but what hasn't changed is that there's still no split screen on here. There's still no landscape. I mean, you got Siri shortcuts. That's a nice upgrade. Find My is a nice upgrade. It's like iOS 12 was faster. iOS 13 is the polished version with a few more features, but it still doesn't give you some things you've been begging for, like a total redesign, split screen multitasking, maybe the ability to put your icons wherever you want them, at a glance information on any screen you want. That's still not here for iOS 13. I don't know if it ever will be, because maybe that'll make it too close to the Android experience. Now on One UI, you get a lot of practical features here, but one thing I don't like, and I'm gonna tell you about Samsung, is that it's a very mashup of Google and Samsung. So you got all these Samsung apps and you got all these Google apps. So it seems very inconsistent by comparison to the Apple experience. If you use all the Samsung applications, then you'll be just fine. But if you typically like to use a lot of Google apps and then you go to the Samsung apps, it just doesn't, match up sometimes. You get a lot of doubles of everything. For people like polish and simplicity, the iOS 13 will be the pick still for 2019. If you don't care about, having an Apple iPhone and you want more productivity out of your phone, the S10e, for example, Samsung devices with One UI are gonna be more practical for productivity-based stuff. They got expandable storage and a more robust file system that can read tons of different attachments through the USB-C port at the bottom. Also USB-C. We don't know if we're gonna get USB-C on the next iPhones. We'll have to see. That's it for me. iOS 13 versus One UI. They're both gonna be great options here for 2019. Pick what you love and call it a day. If you guys got any questions, comments, concerns, video suggestions, drop them down below. If you found this content enjoyable, entertaining, informational, whatever, click the like button for me. Nick here helping you to master your technology. Be sure to be well. Thank you for watching and peace.